So welcome to Behind the Theme. Today we're talking about Sekigahara. Now Sekigahara is my favorite board game of all time. My number one is poker, which I count as more of a social game. And then you got Sekigahara. Now Sekigahara is of course the battle that basically unified Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate that lasted to the modern age. It lasted for about 250 years. And this is one game which is amazing because not only does the game really bring out the history. If you know the history, when you're playing every clan, every play, you're talking about the real history, what happened and everything. But this game does something which I love about this kind of war game, which is it's a simulation, but it's not a direct simulation, meaning that it can happen to what-if scenarios in the game. And it does it in amazingly less than 10 pages, unlike certain games which basically all you're doing is replaying history, which is not that fun in my view, although there are exceptions. Now, Behind the Theme is usually about talking about the game's history, but how the gameplay mechanics really bring it out. But because I love this game so much, I really do feel you need to know the past history about what happened between the personalities, the commanders and all that, to really get a feeling about how strong the theme comes out when you play a betrayal card, so on and so forth. So today's episode is all about take it like a history setup of theme, in a way. Then the next episodes will talk about how the theme and the mechanics and everything come out in the history. Now, this will not be a blow-by-blow account because if you want to know about those things, you can have a lot of books and documentaries you can read. For me, I absolutely love and I did review this book, Sekigahara 1600 by Anthony Bryant. So for me, I'll point out less known facts so that you don't have to go through all the documentaries and everything. And on top of that, with these less known facts, plus if you will even watch one of the documentaries with just a wide layout of the history, it really will help you during the game feel the history come out. It will bring a smile to your face when you play the game. Today we'll talk about the history up to the mobilization of the troops, so let's get into it. Now we'll go all the way back to the death of Oda Nobunaga. Again, don't worry, that we won't be doing a blow-by-blow account. The first unifier, Oda Nobunaga, started to unify Japan, and then he was killed by Akechi Mitsuhide. Now, Hideyoshi, our second unifier, came and basically killed him. And together, they came together to choose the lord of the Oda clan. Their parent was killed by Akechi Mitsuhide. They decided to choose a very young boy. Now, of course, historians say that the reason why Hideyoshi and the rest chose that because they could control a young boy instead of an older one. And in fact, after that happened, when Hideyoshi solidified his power, he actually raised this boy of the Oda clan, basically becoming a father figure to him. This will be important because of what happens later on in this episode. Now, before the fully solidifying of Hideyoshi's power, he actually came to blows with Tokugawa Ieyasu, who also was actually speeding to kill Akechi Mitsuhide to claim basically the leadership position. But after some fighting, they found out that both sides would never come out in any good way if they continued to fight to the end. So what happened, Hideyoshi, ever the great diplomat, gave him terms for submission. And on top of all the many rewards, one of the terms was Tokugawa was exempt for 10 years to fight in any of Hideyoshi's wars, which is going to be really important. And thus, Tokugawa submitted to Hideyoshi. Now, after solidifying his power, Hideyoshi had a problem. As with any leader that comes out of a civil war, you have literally a nation of soldiers. Alright, and as anybody would tell you, having trained murderers sit around do nothing is a very dangerous situation. So, and on top of some hubris, what Hideyoshi did was he decided to take all his troops and take what he saw as the crowning glory of the world, China. But to do that, of course, he had to first cross into Korea. And that's what he did. And it's at this point that our other leader of the Western armies, Sekigahara, Ishida Mitsunari, comes into play. Now, Mitsunari allegedly got his position because one, he was a great administrator, and two, because allegedly he was so good at the tea ceremony, which Hideyoshi greatly loved, that he got the favor of the Taiko, which was the position that Hideyoshi got for himself because he could not become a shogun because he was not descended from the right families. The personality issues and the skills issue of Mitsunari became quite clear in the histories because one, he was well favored by Hideyoshi and in fact got a inspector general position during the war in Korea, but he was not even favored as a commander by Hideyoshi because he was not given any command of any troops. In fact, by many accounts, it's also said that many of the samurai daimyos found him more like a civilian interloping into military affairs. Due to Admiral Yi and the first ironclad ships in history, the war starts going bad for Japan after the initial successes. So what Hideyoshi did was he sent another 100,000 men, this time under Hideki Kobayakawa, who was one of the adopted sons of Hideyoshi. Except there's a problem. He's 15 years old, and he's commanding 100,000 men. As this goes on, and of course with Admiral Yi coming back into favor and fighting Japanese again, naval-wise, and then China entering the war, things go totally south for Japan. And it's at this point that our good friend Ishida Mitsunari starts to blame openly Hideki Kobayakawa for this 15-year-old boy. Basically, it was a death sentence because according to the honor code and all that, he would at best have to commit seppuku, which is ritual suicide. It is at this point that Tokugawa Ieyasu came and reconciled basically the two, Hideyoshi, Taiko, and Hideki. And it is this situation that will come into huge play during the Sekigahara battle. On top of that is that during this whole Korean campaign that Mitsunari basically kept scheming and everything like that, which made him a lot of enemies, even among those who will become his allies in Sekigahara. Now, after the failure of the Korean campaign, Hideyoshi basically ruled the land as de facto leader until his death. But before he died, he had a very young boy as a son. And he set up that the 5 richest and most powerful men, or daimyo, in the land become his guardians of his son until he comes to maturity. Now, if you think back on it, about what Hideyoshi did with Oda Nobunaga's young son, which he then raised as like his own, and how he basically grabs power. This time, although Hideyoshi's son was not picked, it was Tokugawa basically took that same situation. Now he had a young boy he could manipulate. And of course, the biggest problem with this situation was among the 5 lords, Tokugawa basically was the most powerful. One, remember we said for 10 years he was exempt from the Taiko's wars, meaning he had the biggest army in Japan. On top of that, he had 2.5 million koku worth of revenue per year. 1 koku being 180 liters of rice, which in Japanese terms was what they figured someone needed for 1 year to survive. All of this coming from the 8 provinces which Tokugawa controlled, which made up the breadbasket of Japan, which was the whole of the Kanto. In fact, he was so rich in koku that he basically was 2 times richer than his nearest rival among the 5 guardians. So this whole thing's been set up. And slowly, Tokugawa, being so immensely influential, starts to undermine the other guardians. And then he starts doing things that basically show that he is now defunct leader, or is going to be, in anything but name. The first thing he does is to send away Hideyori, which is Hideyoshi's son, away from Fushimi Castle, which was basically the central hub of Japan, because that was where Hideyoshi ruled from. And then after that, he actually installed himself in the castle, basically telling everybody, now I'm the guy who calls shots. And also he starts breaking the rule on political marriages to solidify alliances and everything, which at the same time every lord was doing to a certain extent, because the family branches basically came from 3 big families, Fujiwara, example, the Miyamoto, and so on. So every marriage among samurai was basically a political marriage. So it was one of those laws which could never be enforced. But of course, this all gets the attention of the other daimyo who see this, and now they are fearing that Tokugawa was getting too powerful, especially our dear friend Mitsunari. Being the ever-constant schemer, what Mitsunari did was he firstly tried to get the Maeda clan, which was the second most powerful clan in Japan, involved in a plot, mind you, basically make it look like so that the 2 clans would actually be at a head, and Mitsunari could use the Maeda's clan's strength and money to fight Tokugawa. This was also found out, and Maeda leader, seeing this as not a good situation for his family, went to Tokugawa and told him that this has nothing to do with him. So this didn't work out, and so Mitsunari, never to give up on this point, he hired ninja to try to assassinate Tokugawa, which totally failed. And of course, Tokugawa strangely said, leave him alone. But many of Tokugawa's generals decided they wanted to take his head, and they actually found him one of Mitsunari's friends' mansions. And this became a famous story of how Mitsunari dressed up like a woman to escape. And instead of turning to Sawayama, which was his castle, he turned to the mansion of Tokugawa Ieyasu. And when they met, basically, Tokugawa allowed him to live under his protection, but the terms were that Mitsunari had to go to Sawayama and basically stay out of Fushimi. And there's been huge debate about why Tokugawa did that, but I think in board gaming terms, the most simple thing is that if you know you're better and can beat a particular opponent, why settle for removing that player and allowing a situation where you don't know your enemy or what kind of enemy is going to come up? Basically, an enemy you know is better than one that you don't know, because he might be more talented than you. And Tokugawa is always the pragmatist. Now this goes on for a while, and Tokugawa keeps getting more and more power, and everybody gets more and more worried, especially those loyal to the Taiko, Hideyoshi, and now of course to his son Hideyori. But again, it came to Mitsunari, who constantly just, also arguably, I believe that he also wanted to wrest control from Tokugawa, and he felt he could only do it through scheming. So he came up with this plan, which was to set up Sekigahara. He allied himself with Uesugi Kagekatsu, which was one of the most powerful lords in Japan, and one of the 5 guardians, Uesugi, to start setting up defenses, which was basically breaking the law. He started building defenses, wider roads, to allow bigger armies to move through and everything like that. And this alarmed not only Tokugawa, but everybody around there, because at one point, in one of these building projects, there was 80,000 men working around the clock to build castles and roads. So Tokugawa, of course, took the political route first. He sent letters and everything. And basically one of Kagekatsu's men sent back a letter saying that, you know what, I can tell you 1,000 times I'm not rebelling. It is you who are doing so. And if you're never going to believe me, so just come at me. Basically, come at me, bro. And that's what he did. But strangely to say, Tokugawa moved himself from Fushimi very slowly, extremely slowly with the amount of men he had with him, to move east. And the reason why is because he believed in the 2 lords under him, Masamune and Yoshiakira, to contain Uesugi. And what Tokugawa basically moved slowly to do was to see and gauge what Mitsunari's plan was, and then react to it. And of course, as expected, the plan came to fruition, and of course Tokugawa was totally prepared for it. Now, what was this plan? We're going to talk about it in the next episode. So, thank you very much. Till next week.